because I know in my heart, I was very close to Michael, and I know in my heart that Michael was murdered by the police. Plus, I have many bits of proof that I've seen over the past 2 weeks that verifies this accusation.
He was so sweet. I don't know why they did it. I don't know why. I hate violence. I hate violence, and I don't know why they killed him. But they're not going to get away with it, that's for sure.
I thought he was really cute, so I let him dance in my video, and he made one really strong impression on me, and that was that he was really fragile. And racism didn't end after the 60s. I think we're talking about more than police brutality. I think we're talking about more than a close friend of everybody's, is killed senselessly.
Silberfarb, spokesman for the transit police.
APO, Rodriguez 10 Precinct, shield number 1664.
The incident began at 2:51 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And at 3:22, which is 31 minutes later.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
31 minutes later, they were at Bellevue, and the prisoner was in Bellevue.
We want to know what happened during that hour. You understand? Yeah. So, look, this could be torture to show the other graffiti, not to paint in the subway,
Many officers?
Yeah.
Well, it was the original arresting officer who found him, who saw him writing graffiti on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
There were two other officers who accompanied the arresting officer in the patrol car. One was the driver of the patrol car, and the other was the recorder, the person who rides in the seat next to the driver.
Mm-hmm.
There was also on the scene two transit police officers who were from one of our emergency medical rescue vans. That emergency medical rescue van responded to the scene when the officer at first radioed for help, because he felt that Stewart was going to be a problem. So there were two officers there.
There were five transit police officers.
I don't think Michael knew what was going to hit, I don't think, because it was a surprise fall, the way the cop come, grab him like this and threw him against the concrete floor. He didn't expect that, I guess. His hand was on his back, so imagine when he fall like that, as you can see. You understand?
Ran up the stairs, and right at the top of the stairs at 14th Street, he fell to the sidewalk.
Yeah, he didn't fall downstairs, he fell. I mean, this guy threw him down. It's a difference from fell and threw.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that he threw him down against the concrete floor. You understand? If he trips, he will fall forward. But the passer grabbed and threw him this way, down. So it means almost like that.
Mm-hmm.
See?
Yeah.
When he threw him, it was more like I said. When he threw him against the weak hand. One officer on top of him, and then when the other officer rolled him and slapped him, see, then he grabbed him like that. Then he let him drop again. Then they stand him up.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see.
The medical van responded not because it was a medical van, but because it had police officers in it. These are police officers. Besides their medical training, they're trained to perform police duties.
One officer told him something. Then he walked over to Michael Stewart. The officer was on top of him, got off. He comes and turns Michael Stewart over. He comes and slaps him, and then he grabs him and sees his face. Then he let him go, and then when the officer started closing in, you know, because they were aware that we were watching. And then I can imagine what was really happening. You know, I'm aware that they're kicking Michael Stewart's butt, you know what I mean? They had him about 10 minutes. Then they stand him up.
Stewart was put into the back of the patrol car, and they proceeded to First Avenue, to Union Square. The medical van followed along with them, and so it was on hand in the Union Square area when they had to restrain Stewart. He was kicking violently, so in fact there was two officers from the medical van that supplied the bandages, the medical gauze that was used to bind up his ankles. According to the log, it looks like 10 minutes in the Union Square area, parking area. After they bound up his feet, they put him back into the radio car to bring him over to Bellevue Hospital.
And then in the pedal car, he lapsed into a coma.
Yeah, we're not sure exactly where that happened, whether he was still in the car. The officers think that he was still conscious when they arrived at Bellevue, but they didn't really, they had no reason to think he was unconscious when they arrived. But when they got there, a nurse pointed out that he appeared to be unconscious, and we're really not sure just when he lapsed into unconsciousness, whether he was still in the car, whether he was being taken from the car into the emergency room, or whether it was in the emergency room.
He was handcuffed, hands behind him. He also had his leg and feet cuffed, also tied with a rag. His face was pressed down in the stretcher padding. I looked at his hands, they were blue, and I said to the police officer, "His hands are blue, can you loosen this a bit?" Then I looked down at his face. I said, "God damn, his face is blue too. Let's get him inside."
It took at least 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes to get the cuffs off. Then we were able to turn him over on his back and get his clothes off.
And his injuries were, to my eye, were entirely consistent with the injuries a person would receive who was in a wrestling match on a New York City sidewalk. There was absolutely no evidence of any beating of any kind.
He had bruises on both sides of his forehead and swelling, evidence of very forceful blows.
And this business about any kind of hemorrhaging from the eyes, I was very specific about looking at his eyes. His eyes were absolutely clear.
The professional, it appeared to me that he was very brutally beaten.
At that time, the evidence of multiple contusions and abrasions over virtually every aspect of his body, including his neck, in the absence of any clinical evidence of any other organic disease, together with the episodes of cardiac and respiratory failure, and evidence of enormous damage to the central nervous system, made the initial impression of the application of extraordinary force to his neck and body my first diagnosis.
One second, please.
An autopsy was performed upon the body of Michael J. Stewart, beginning at 1:30 p.m. and concluding at 8:15 p.m. The cause of death is cardiac arrest with survival for 13 days. Bronchopneumonia, pending further study. The autopsy disclosed findings consistent with the hospital course of coma following a cardiac arrest. While there was evidence of healing injuries on the body, the autopsy demonstrated no evidence of physical injury resulting or contributing to death. Further tests, including examination of the brain and spinal cord and microscopic tests, will be performed.
The Transit Police Department is very relieved at the report of the medical examiner has cleared the air of these very serious allegations of police brutality.
Sergeant Burke, Officer Dempsey, just a moment ago I asked you a question. Is there a misunderstanding here, or am I understanding you correctly? I asked you a moment ago whether or not you went inside and you went over the press release with medical examiner Elliot Gross. And I thought the response was affirmative. Am I wrong?
There might have been a misunderstanding. No.
You did?
Sergeant?
Yeah.
No, we spoke about the autopsy.
Yeah, you spoke about the autopsy, but he is about to come out here to talk to us. So
Right,
obviously he talked to you about the autopsy a few moments before he came out here to talk to us. Do you think there's anything irregular about that?
Not that I could see.
Well, he's supposed to be the umpire in this. He's not supposed to take your side or the family's side. He's supposed to be impartial. And he had you in just before he came out to see us. Isn't that strange?
Well, we sat through the whole autopsy itself, so I don't
You think
see
that there might be a
anything
violation of law here?
I would say no.
The spirit of the law?
I would say no.
The impartial medical examiner?
I would say no.
Have you seen the press release itself yet?
No, I have not.
We're waiting for him.
We're waiting for him right now.
That's why we came out here.
You have no idea what the medical examiner is going to say?
No, I do.
With regards to this particular case, there was no evidence of injury reflecting a strangulation.
At the time that Dr. Gross stated that Michael Stewart did die of cardiac arrest, he had before him, but neglected or failed to mention, the fact that he did observe swelling of the brain, that he did observe petechial hemorrhages in the eyes, that he did observe innumerable bruises and contusions over many aspects of his body, particularly the neck, and that he did observe that there was no other organic disease of the heart or significant disease of any other organ. This combination of observations at that time certainly would lead the prudent pathologist to yield a tentative diagnosis of death from anoxia of the brain related to the application of force to the neck.
Today there's a protest as a result of the illegal extraction of the eyes of Michael Stewart outside the presence of his family's private forensic pathologist, as was previously agreed to prior to the gross autopsy that was performed on the 29th of September. And that's basically what the demonstration is about today, to highlight the significance of this illegal act by Dr. Gross, which is a further manifestation of his cover-up in this case.
Dr. Gross did indeed remove the eyes and did indeed place them into the appropriate solutions for making the appropriate microscopic sections at a later date. It is widely known that this procedure does frequently wash out or blanch out the small petechial hemorrhages in the eyes.
The little hemorrhages in the eyes are a function of a problem which happens when the neck is compressed.
Stop protecting transit police killer! And what we are charging is that he was beaten to death. That he was beaten to death, the same way Arthur Miller was shot, was strangled to death. Louis Baez was shot 21 times. Ricky Borden, 11 years old, was killed. Clifford Glover, 10 years old, was killed. Claude Reese, 14 years old, was killed. Jay Parker, 15-year-old honor student was killed, and guess who killed them? Not some thugs or gangsters, but the people we pay to protect us.
They probably do it for nothing, just because you black.
Right.
Okay. To be accused of something. Right? And the treatment that I may receive could be similar to what happened to him.
Exactly.
Without them really having a meaning for what is going on, more or less.
Yeah.
But I just feel more or less that I hope that some type of justice comes through about this, because it shouldn't have happened that way. You know, there was a way to prevent it and avoid it. You know, graffiti's not a serious crime.
Right.
You know, where as far as brutality or assault may have to come in. But I just say that I wish that, you know, things would get better. Some justice would be done for this young man, because I feel it was injustice served to him.
And I had this friend, and he used to ride on the trains, and you know, he had got shot, and while he was in a layoff, riding on the train.
It's the same thing. I just heard that, you know, while he was riding on the train, you know, instead of the cops telling him to stop, you know, they just, you know, they started shooting at him or whatever, you know.
Police, TA cops.
Bow, bow.
As soon as they come to arrest you, they don't come out and say you're under arrest, show you a badge. They put a gun in your face.
No, they don't do that shit.
They don't do that no more. They put a gun in your face first, and then they tell you you're under arrest. So you have a. They don't even read you your rights no more. They don't even read you the rights no more. That's against the law right there. They supposed to tell them, listen, you know, you're under arrest. You're not supposed to ride in the wall, and you know, handcuff him, and you know, bring him down to the station house. You know what I mean? Not to beat him up like that. You know, beat him up like that, like you know, like he's a real criminal. That's real messed up.
I don't think we can depend on the police at this time for any information, because I really believe that the police protect their own in times like this. And I also believe that Bellevue Hospital is linked with the police. I'm a white middle-class girl, and I knew of things like this, but I was basically very ignorant to it until it came so close to home that it affected someone I love. And now I see through totally different eyes now. And the past 2 weeks, I've seen the most incredible conspiracy, cover-up, and complete corruption. And for Michael's sake, I will fight this.
The final cause of death is upper cervical transverse necrotizing myelopathy, cardiac arrest with survival for 13 days, ischemic cerebral necrosis, bronchopneumonia. The upper cervical transverse necrotizing myelopathy refers to a physical injury to the spinal cord in the upper neck. The ischemic cerebral necrosis refers to the condition of the brain resulting from absence of oxygen following cardiac arrest.
As we stated following the report of Dr. Gross on yesterday, his conclusions are riddled with ambiguities. We have called this press conference in an attempt to aid the press and the public in sorting through the obfuscatory language of the Gross final report, and to introduce at least a modicum of clarity to the discussion of the cause of death of Michael J. Stewart.
A deception? You're saying that the chief medical examiner is deceiving the public?
It's deceiving in this manner, that the important findings and the ordering of important findings in the final diagnosis are not correct. Certainly the most important finding was the injury to the brain. And I note that in the description of the dissection of the brain, no mention was even made of the weight of the brain, which indeed was swollen by every observer and every observation. it would be logical to conclude from the written statements in this autopsy that the sequence of events was the application of force or forces or pressure or pressures to the neck and other portions of the body with anoxia as a result of those pressures and forces.
Cutting off of oxygen to the brain.
Yes, sir. With swelling of the brain and hemorrhage in the brain, with petechial or very small hemorrhages in the eyes, with massive necrosis and death of brain tissue ensuing from that moment on, and finally resulting in death by cardiac arrest 13 days later. It is that ordering which is important, because that explains all of the findings, and there is not another bit of evidence, or there is not another finding in this gross autopsy report that contradicts that appraisal.
The neck was compressed.
The neck was compressed.
The neck was
Could the neck be?
With a fall, no. Not with,
Would it have to be human pressure?
no, it wouldn't have to be human pressure, but it would have to be pressure against the neck, maintained pressure,
by someone else.
applied pressure.
Could it have been from being in an awkward position with your neck against something and somebody leaning against you?
It is possible, yes. Yeah,
It would take
yeah.
another
That should make
It would take, in other words,
injury?
yeah, what it would take is a pressure sustained against the neck
Okay, then doctor,
Over a
what's your...
period of time?
over a period of time. No, not at one
How
instant.
long a period of time?
5, 10, 20, well, maybe, 20, 30 seconds would do it. I mean...
There were 6 charges against him. Just a second. The charges were... criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, resisting arrest, graffiti, disorderly conduct, and unlawful possession of marijuana.
The police spokesman said to the press the first day of Michael's ordeal that he was to be arrested for possession of cocaine. These charges were very quickly swept under the carpet because if these charges were held against him, it would be considered a felony.
The reason that a felony complaint was not filed by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office under the exclusive direction of Robert Morgenthau was again because of his intention and his role in the cover-up to preclude, in fact, the attorneys from cross-examining the prosecution witnesses, namely the police officers, in a preliminary hearing.
Obtaining an indictment in a case like this is extremely difficult. We do, however, expect an indictment. We are insisting on an indictment in this matter. The problem is that the police officers who were the witnesses to the murder have immunity from prosecution if they testify before a grand jury. That's the problem we face, and that is why the medical examiner's testimony is so crucial in this case, and that's why we feel that Dr. Gross has already compromised himself and that outside, independent experts should be brought in to testify.
In January of 1963, a few Muslims were arrested while selling newspapers and charged with brutality against police. Malcolm led a quiet vigil outside the Manhattan Criminal Court building at 110 Center Street, and he reiterated his position to the press on their right to self-defense, especially in these violent times.
It's not a case of taking militant action against the police department. As I said earlier, we obey the law. We respect the law more than many of the police officers do.
Cool. He wasn't wild in that, right?
Quiet. Yeah, he was a quiet guy. Yeah.
Quiet. Left everybody alone. Kept to himself. Mind his business.
Right. I only see him when he would come home and go out again. That's the only time, I would see him. When I go down there, when I go to his crib sometime, he would answer the door, but that was it.
sat here for a while, smoked a cigarette, got up, and we walked.
We're going to 14th Street and 1st Avenue, please.
He wanted to go to this club on West Broadway.
On the right side of the street, please.
It's kind of late, so...
So where's the time?
He said that he'd take the train home, and I asked him if I could give him a ride. So he said, sure. And called a taxi, and got him a taxi. Dropped him off on 14th Street and 1st Avenue. Kissed him and said, speak to you tomorrow. And he walked down the stairs and went goodbye. That's what happened.
Corner is good, please.